So good afternoon. I'm really delighted to be here this afternoon to talk to you about what is a really key area for government. There's an unprecedented shift in how the world generates and uses energy. So prompted by the challenges of energy security, limited resources and climate change, we're all, right across the world, moving to new energy technologies and systems. And in the UK, we are trying to be at the forefront of this energy revolution. The government has already set out its plans to deal with our energy trilemma. We want to decarbonise our energy, and we're determined to meet our 2050 legally binding targets. But keeping the lights on in the decades ahead is non-negotiable, and providing energy that is affordable for consumers is absolutely vital to our plans. So in her recent speech on a new direction for UK energy policy, the Secretary of State, Amber Rudd, made clear that as we see it, the challenge we face is how to make sure that the energy remains the backbone of our economy whilst we transform to a low-carbon system. And we think that new nuclear is crucial to meeting that challenge. Crucial in decarbonising power generation to meet our legally binding targets, crucial in keeping the lights on in the decades ahead, and also crucial in providing safe, affordable and reliable energy for the future. So that's why the government doesn't just prioritise new nuclear energy, but also recognises that we must decommission our legacy nuclear sites and manage our radioactive waste effectively. And I can tell you I've just come from an excellent meeting with the board of the NDA to talk about their future plans. So 2015 has been pretty much a landmark year for the nuclear sector. At the end of the month, Wilver in Anglesey will close. Wilver is the world's oldest operating power station by date of construction, the last of the first generation of civil nuclear power plants in the UK. It's also a reminder of the UK's nuclear heritage, that we have been leaders in the world in the nuclear sector for more than 50 years. And at the same time, we welcome EDF and CGN's recent commitment to taking forward Hinkley Point C, the first new nuclear plant in a generation. And I was delighted to very recently visit the site, to see Cannington Court, and to get an update on progress. Hinkley Point will provide 7% of the UK's electricity generation needs. It'll create over 5,500 jobs at the peak of construction, and will provide over £40 million injection to the local economy each year. But Hinkley is just the beginning. Industry, as you all know here, has set out proposals to develop up to 18 gigawatts of new nuclear power in the UK. This could deliver around a third of the electricity we'll need in the 2030s. Once built, those power plants could reduce our carbon emissions by more than 40 million tonnes. They'll bring an estimated £80 billion of private investment into the UK, with about 30,000 people employed across the new nuclear supply chain at the peak of construction. So industry has plans, but there's also a really important role for the government to foster the right conditions for the UK New Build programme. As part of facilitating future investment in new nuclear, the government announced last month that we would not continue the previous administration's policy of no subsidy for new nuclear. The no subsidy policy stated that nuclear should only be offered support if similar support was available to other technologies. This concept of similar support is very difficult to reconcile with the need to take into account the characteristics of different technologies. It's not to say that new nuclear is favoured over other technologies, but what it does mean is that a common approach across technologies at different stages of maturity is not any longer considered the best way to ensure a long-term technology-neutral framework to bring about the transition to low-carbon generation as cost-effectively and securely as possible. So the no-subsidy policy is no longer relevant. And then separately, the government is focused on realising the massive potential of the new nuclear programme for UK suppliers. Government is clear that the UK supply chain must be given the opportunity to compete for high-value contracts throughout the sector. So we're working with industry to deliver a joint vision that fairly and appropriately maximises the UK content in new nuclear, as well as promoting the UK as a credible nuclear provider within what is a global market. So this vision is supported by joint industry and government actions being delivered within the Nuclear Industry Council, and I do want to come back to the NIC later. But the government recognises that more needs to be done so that UK suppliers can gain access to projects led by overseas developers. It also recognises that it can be a challenge for the UK to be cost competitive in a global market. So there are already a number of initiatives to help the UK supply chain develop capacity and capability, such as the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, the Fit for Nuclear programme, and the Manufacturing Advisory Service. And I want us to be clear on where the UK can grow its capability in the nuclear supply chain, and then to focus our resources on getting UK companies into contention for significant contracts that enable them to thrive. And of course, a skilled and varied workforce will be essential to build our new nuclear fleet on time and on budget, and to maximise the opportunities for the UK supply chain. The scale of the industry's new build aspirations, the length of time since the last new build project, and, if I may make so bold, the high average age of the existing nuclear workforce, relatively high. We're all young, really. But it does mean it's essential to take action now to prevent skills gaps developing over the course of the new nuclear programme. So the most recent nuclear workforce assessment suggests the total demand for skilled nuclear workers is around 78,000 full-time equivalents, and that's expected to rise as both the civil and defence sectors' new build programmes gather pace. So recently I was truly delighted to attend and open EDF's Cannington Court campus in Somerset, which, as well as providing a fantastic facility for training EDF employees in all aspects of their business, will also be providing future employees for Hinkley Point C. The Chancellor has now confirmed funding to create 5 national colleges, and the National College for Nuclear is one of them. It'll have 2 campuses, one in the north and one in Somerset. The national colleges will be a key part of our measures to address gaps in high-level skills needed by employers. And then looking further into the future, alternative nuclear technologies may offer exciting opportunities as well, helping us to meet our energy and climate change challenges, as well as to develop domestic capability at scale. The UK government recognises the potential of small modular reactors, and I'm sure you're aware that the Chancellor has announced that government will invest at least £250 million in nuclear research and development. This funding will include a competition to identify which SMR would offer best value for development in the UK, paving the way to build one of the world's first SMR designs in the 2020s. The techno-economic assessment, which will provide evidence on how SMRs could contribute to the UK's energy needs and to economic growth, is ongoing and will finish in March next year. It remains an important step in the development of our SMR policy, and we'll be bringing forward further details of the competition early next year. But of course, as we look to the future, in order to address the energy and climate challenges we face, we can't overlook the importance of effectively tackling our nuclear legacy. Sellafield is Europe's most hazardous site, containing legacy ponds and silos, which are some of the most challenging facilities to decommission in the world. And I have to say, when I visited there, I was equal parts impressed and slightly shocked at the scale of the challenge that lies ahead, but very reassured to see the amazing engineering skill and the determination of the workforce into solving those problems. And the government, of course, continues to make tackling the UK's civil nuclear legacy safely, securely and cost-effectively a top priority. The NDA has successfully prioritised its resources over the years to make tangible progress on decommissioning, with a primary focus on the highest risks and hazards at Sellafield. And in the spending review, the Chancellor allocated 11 billion of net funding to the NDA for the next 5 years. In addition, the NDA will, of course, continue to generate some commercial income, which will also offset its costs. That's a major commitment which allows the NDA to continue to deliver its vital mission. And of course, we do expect it to do that as efficiently as possible. In terms of delivering value for money, we expect the NDA to achieve savings and efficiencies of over £1 billion between 2016-17 and 2019-20. And so the NDA will be setting out more details of the implications of the settlement in their business plan and strategy documents, which will be published in the new year. The consultation on both will be open for 6 weeks. So with our new build programme, we have learned from the mistakes of the past. The government has put in place robust legislation which, under the funded decommissioning programme, requires the operator, rather than the taxpayer, to pay for the plant's waste and decommissioning costs. So the funded decommissioning programme for Hinckley was approved in October. But of course, tackling our legacy waste is only one piece of this giant landscape. The UK government remains firmly committed to delivering geological disposal as the safest and most secure means of managing our higher activity waste in the long term. Crucially, the cost of decommissioning and disposal of waste from the new sites is being built in right from the start. And this will be a very long-term undertaking, spanning many decades, and it's important that we do this right. It's also important that progress continues to be made in the short term, with a clear focus on the goal of delivering safe and secure final disposal of all our radioactive waste. Dealing with the UK's civil plutonium is equally complex. Close collaboration between government and industry is essential to achieving a solution. Safely and securely managing plutonium remains a government priority. We're working with others to share best practices, and we're looking internationally to help inform a decision about what is best for the UK. And ministers will be considering how to proceed in the coming months. And I want to reassure you that the government takes this issue very seriously, and that's why a provision has been made in the NDA's budget to continue to make meaningful progress on this important but complex issue. So underpinning all of our work on nuclear is the overriding importance of continuing to ensure security and safety in the sector. The Office for Nuclear Regulation plays a major and ever more important role as the nuclear industry undergoes change. Their role as regulator is vital in ensuring that new nuclear facilities are designed, built, and operated to the highest standards and in a manner that improves and maintains public confidence. So the ONR is making its approach to nuclear security regulation more outcome-focused. It ensures the sector is on the front foot to protect against modern and evolving threats. It encourages robust and effective security competency and culture to be developed, and ensures that those responsible for nuclear security are required to think more holistically about risks and mitigations, and places a real onus on the industry to propose and justify their security arrangements to the regulator. This will be reinforced by the production of revised regulatory guidance to the nuclear industry during 2016. And then in terms of emergency planning, we've recently published new National Nuclear Emergency Planning and Response Guidance on the gov.uk website. Developed through extensive stakeholder engagement, this provides a cohesive set of documents to help local planners, Whitehall departments, devolved administrations and other agencies to write effective emergency plans. So my department is producing a long-term coherent cyber security strategy for the civil nuclear sector, which will be published next year. This strategy sets out a framework for all stakeholders, including industry, so that the evolving cyber risk continues to be mitigated. So I said at the start how much we value working with industry. The nuclear sector is an exciting area to work in, but it does present challenges of rare complexity and scale, and we can only meet those challenges if government, business and industry work together. So I'm very pleased that we do continue to cooperate so successfully. And the Nuclear Industry Council has a key role in this close working relationship. Alongside the NIA, we're concluding the review of the Nuclear Industry Council, and I expect that it will continue in the new year, focusing on the long-term strategic direction of the nuclear industry in the UK. Consultation feedback from the majority of members makes it clear that it must also evolve to meet the changing demands of the sector. So acting on this feedback, a smaller, more strategic group will be created to provide a refocused environment for engagement. And more details will follow from the NIA and the government in the new year. These changes will help realise the shared vision of the nuclear industry and maximise UK economic, employment and growth opportunities. So in conclusion, it's been a big year for nuclear in the UK in 2015, and as we head towards the new year, I think we have a lot to be proud of. This has perhaps been the most important year in a generation, and I do genuinely want to thank all of you for your part in making it such a success. 2016 is no doubt going to bring its own challenges, but I'm excited and I'm very reassured and anticipating the enormous accomplishments we can make over the next year or two, and I look forward to working with all of you to make it a success. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks.
Do come and take a seat in our comfy area.
Lovely.
Just for a couple of minutes. You've gone through pretty much every question we could have possibly wanted to ask you in that very comprehensive review of what you say has been a busy, bustling year. You're having a bit of a nuclear day, are you? Because you've been at the NDA board earlier.
That's right.
That's come up, interestingly, obviously we kicked off here with decommissioning, the work that's going on at Sellafield and the work that the NDA is doing. But it's interesting how it's bubbled up, if you like, through so many other questions. So particularly the question of public response and public support for nuclear. It's very often the area that people have most concern about, which I'm sure as a politician you probably relate to. And I think your reaction when you went to Sellafield probably encompasses it. What do you think government can do both to improve the actual performance in decommissioning and reassure people of what is going on? We can't take everybody to Sellafield and show them what's going on, can we?
So yeah, I mean, it's absolutely the key point that you raise, and what I always say, so I've been actually having a nuclear week, not just a nuclear day, because yesterday afternoon I met with the anti-nuclear NGOs, and a number of them have been involved against nuclear for as long as a lot of you have been born, from the look of you. You all look relatively young. So, equally, for them, they have literally had concerns about nuclear for much of their adult lives. And so for me, I think what's absolutely vital is that we say to people, new nuclear and dealing with the legacy they go hand in hand. You can't do the one without the other. So having credible plans for example, the geological disposal facility, for the funded decommissioning plans, having very credible commitment from industry too to dealing with the waste that emerges from new nuclear is absolutely a part of it. But it's actually like any energy sector. I mean, most energy could be dangerous if it fell on you, if it blew up. You know, there are risks in everything we do in life. And the important thing is to educate and inform people and not try and pull the wool over their eyes. So what we have to, all of us, accept is that there is risk in everything we do, and it's our role and your role to mitigate it down to the lowest possible level that we can.
Do you think the public mood is shifting there? I mean, it's been interesting with all the stories going through, obviously the Hinkley Point C, rebuild both 2 years ago and then recently in October. Gets a lot of high-profile press, and lots of people go out and do vox pops. I mean, as obviously you wouldn't have both, yourselves and the vast majority of Labour MPs supporting it if it wasn't something you felt your voters were now more supportive of. Do you think the mood has changed, or is it just uncertain?
I mean, there are some, it's quite interesting how there are some energy sectors you would think people would support, and for me, I have to say shale gas is one. I would have thought people would get behind that. But obviously they don't at the moment. You know, there are challenges still with communications there. Nuclear, on the other hand, you could quite see that people would be very concerned about it, again, because they don't have access to enough information to be able to form a view. And yet, I would say actually that there is a fairly balanced, even-handed view of nuclear. And certainly when I went down to see Hinkley C and to open Cannington Court, it was a resolutely positive view from the local community, from the supply chain, partly because it's an energy source, but also partly because of the enormous economic and jobs potential that that sector offers. And those are very real long-term career jobs. So I think provided what we can very credibly actually address and communicate the efforts we're taking to deal with the risks properly, then I think people will welcome the opportunity to find and exploit a new low-carbon source of energy that, by the way, offers their children and grandchildren long-term career jobs.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So crystal ball time. It's the end of the 2020s. Coal is pretty much finished. There's gas. There's a lot of these nuclear power stations we've been hearing about today are actually generating. Hinkley C almost certainly, Wilver almost certainly, maybe Oldbury as well. Who knows where else we're going to be getting at Moorside coming on stream. What do you think the overall energy mix is going to, what's going to be turning my lights on? Where's it going to be coming from?
I mean, we don't have a crystal ball. And, I was just today reflecting on the fact that only a couple of years ago there were forecasts that wholesale oil prices would be $200 a barrel this year. So, I mean, how wrong can you be? So I'm always slightly hesitant with crystal ball gazing, but...
go on, we won't hold you to it.
Okay, thanks. So you're not going to be around and beat me up in 5 years' time, 15 years' time. I mean, what I would like to see is much more focus on reducing demand by energy efficiency, by putting people and businesses in control of their own energy consumption. So one thing I would like to see is a much more predictable and steady demand flow, and there's a lot of stuff that's going to make that happen over time. In terms of what the energy mix is, my expectation is there will still be the requirement for a lot of electricity, and to a certain extent, depending what happens with transport, if you were to electrify all vehicles, for example, and who'd have thought, with the VW, very sorry story, we might have thought ultra-low emission vehicles were the answer, but actually possibly electric vehicles are instead. Who knows? And I'm not sort of telling you anything out of turn here. These are the sorts of thoughts. But if we were to go to electric transport across the UK, that would massively increase the demand for electricity, which would, of course, mean that you'd be looking for much, much more contribution from nuclear. And you'd also be looking at more balancing systems like storage to be able to deal with intermittency and so on. But I actually think what we've set out in our energy policy reset is we want a mixed source of energy. So we want to get away from unabated coal and into gas because we see that as a very clear bridge. It's a huge decarbonisation win to go from coal to gas. But then we see low carbon future being a mixture of nuclear, renewables, some gas, yes, and potentially things that we don't even know about yet. Potentially some of the things, small modular reactors, possibly wave and tidal technology, possibly some things that no one's even heard of. By 15 years' time. And I think the interesting thing for the whole energy sector is the speed at which new inventions are actually becoming scalable and real. But certainly I think for the UK, new nuclear has a big part to play. And actually the one thing I will say about nuclear is in the 2030s, I would love to see us as the world's biggest exporter of SMR technology. I'd love to see us building, designing and exporting nuclear again.
Which brings us to skills, but there's so many questions we could go into. But listen, I'm really grateful to you for making some time in your busy schedule to come and see us. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, please, for Andrea Leadsom, Minister of State for